Adam, can I ask you, how did you come to be a designer?
I guess maybe when I studied at high school, and I had a bit of a love for art, so I spent a lot of time in the art room, and I kind of thought I might fall into a bit of a fine arts direction. But then I guess I had a little bit of a mathematical side as well. And at the end of finishing high school, rather than maybe going straight into fine arts, I was thinking about maybe architecture or something like that. This was in 1990, so quite a while ago. And then I discovered this subject called industrial design, which probably back then wasn't quite as well known. And I grew up in Perth but moved to Sydney, to the University of Technology, Sydney, and I studied industrial design at UTS. And I guess that's how my career started.
Right, and you became a furniture designer.
Yeah, well, I guess I'm an industrial designer. I do different things, but I'm probably most well known for being a furniture designer. And that probably came about from in the third year. It was a 4-year degree, but in the third year we had a project to design a folding chair for. It was a collaboration with industry, with Siebel Furniture. Some of you might know Siebel Furniture, and we had to exploit a new technology back then, which was called gas-assisted injection moulding. And it was the first time I'd ever designed a piece of furniture, and there was also a folding component to it. And in some ways, that really sort of started my obsession for furniture. And at the beginning of my career, I used to make a lot of folding pieces and so forth. But that definitely would have started it. Yeah.
So you said it was you were asked to utilise a particular manufacturing technique. Now, I happen to know that you have been a bit of a maker, and you've been interested in manufacture your whole life. How does that play out in your sort of passion for design?
Definitely, I come from a hands-on background. I've always made things from when I was a young child. I was always making cubby houses and go-karts and working with fathers in the neighbourhood to create things, or grandfathers and that kind of thing. So I always had a making side that I very much enjoyed. And then with my design practice, it's very important for me that I work through ideas, making small models and maquettes, and then quite often I'll make the one-to-one prototype, and then I work very closely with whoever the manufacturer is who will end up making it. I'm just very involved, and I really enjoy that side to it. And I think it's very important to build a good relationship with whoever it is that you're working with. And for a piece of furniture, you have to look at it in the flesh, to make sure you're happy with the proportions. You have to sit in it to make sure it's comfortable. Yeah. So I think it's very challenging to be working in Australia and working with a company overseas and trying to create something if you don't have the direct contact with it.
I just wanted to follow through. I know that you grew up making things, and it's part of, you have a particular passion for it, and it plays into your design. Can you design without understanding manufacturing?
Oh, no. Well, I think it's important to understand things in the real, structure and how things go together. And I think there's always going to be a place for digital manufacturing and so forth, but I think it's very important to first understand connections and materials and all that kind of thing. And it's just rewarding, it's a nice way.
And about the new technologies come along. Do you find yourself? How do you approach new technologies? Are they exciting to you, or are they? I don't think I'm one of those people who is obsessed with new technologies, but I'm definitely very interested in them. Yeah.
But I don't. For me, I think if I get given a project or a brief, it's not like I'm designing for that technology. I think the best thing you can do is try to create something, and you use the best technology to create it. Or, I think it's silly to think I'm only going to use this material. You use the most appropriate material to achieve whatever it is you're trying to achieve, kind of thing.
Right.
But for me, with little maquettes and making small models, or maybe a little detail, I'll use 3D printing and that kind of thing. And what would have taken me a lot longer to achieve previously, I can do very quickly now. So it saves a lot of time.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now, your work, you do a lot of work that results in mass manufacture, but you also do one-off pieces that are, they're conceptual. Can you talk about how they play off against each other in your design?
Yeah, I think generally I still go about it in exactly the same way. There's still a brief to achieve something, and the outcome is a real thing. So you've still got to design it structurally so it works and all that kind of thing. I guess the only other part of, I probably don't have anything in mass production. It's probably still small production in comparison to other mass production.
Yeah.
But it's definitely a very big part of it, if you're creating a commercial product, is to get clever in the way you go about the production to bring the price point down so it does, deliver to the consumer at a price point which is feasible. So there's a whole other cleverness in trying to create things at a good price point and working with the manufacturer to create things in a more efficient manner.
So essentially it's the same process.
It's pretty much this, yeah. There's just that other little component.
Yeah. But when you're just working on something that is more conceptual, do you, along the way, are you just thinking about that work for what it's worth, or do you sort of go, I can see something here that might be part of a production model, at some point in the future, or do you feel you're just sort of concentrating on one job at a time?
No, I think definitely they all overlap.
Yeah.
I definitely have ideas that have started off as a one-off, or vice versa, something that might be more commercial and then it's come to a limited edition piece or that kind of thing. Yeah, I don't think there's a black and white, to be honest.
I know through your work at UTS, you've worked with a lot of students and helped to bring their work to fruition. So can you tell me, what are the attributes that you see in the successful work that students bring to you, and what are the approaches and processes that you see in those students that I guess derive the most from the process and are most successful? Does that make sense as a question? Yeah.
I think definitely students who are curious, and I think we have such a saturation of product. There's so many media streams to look at so many things that are going on, and I think unfortunately because of that there's so much derivative product that comes out. So from my point of view, I really appreciate students who kind of don't really give a hoot about what's happening anywhere else, but are just much more preoccupied with doing their own thing, whether or not it might be a little bit awkward or strange, but it's definitely a unique thing. And I think of the people who seem to do well, they develop their own style, and it doesn't come from anywhere else. It comes from whatever it is that they were doing.
Right. And do you see? Do you see a lot of derivative work? Do you think it's a problem for students?
Yeah, no, I see a lot of derivative work.
Right.
And I think maybe because I'm immersed in it and I probably understand a lot of the products that already exist and so forth, and there's always going to be crossovers and so forth, but so many times I just think things that are already done, and it's what's the point of doing something that's already done? The whole point is to hopefully come up with something that is offering something else, whether it's a function or an aesthetic.
Yeah. And what are you working on at the moment? What are your current inspirations?
More of the same, I guess. I'm working with some lovely local companies. One of them being Colt Furniture, who the chair that we have here is for Colt, and another company in Melbourne called Tate, who's an outdoor company, and I'm working on some new collections with them which will be launching later on in the year. Doing some kind of art installations of sort, which is a little bit exciting because it's a little bit more artistic, which is interesting. I've teamed up with an interior designer who's moved back to Sydney, but she's from Hong Kong, and we're working on a restaurant in Taiwan. That's been a nice thing for me because it's more interior design, so the products really have to work particularly with the space. Some smaller objects. I'm working with an Italian company called Alessi, and some small objects with them. So sort of a big range.
And your inspirations are the same from when you first started?
Yeah, it's hard when people ask you what inspires a piece, and I don't think for me it's not. I don't go to any particular thing to be inspired, but I think the more you do it, you have this sort of lifetime of experiences, and for me, I'm constantly looking, but I'm hopefully not looking at. Say if I want to design a chair, I'm not looking at another chair to be inspired, but if I've got a project, you're looking for the way things go together. It might be a gutter on a house, or be the way someone behaves when they're at a restaurant, or I really try and constantly be observing to see if that might inspire something. But I try and do my best not to be inspired by things that already exist in the same field.
So can I ask then, you just see what you see as you walk around, you don't necessarily go looking for things. One of the reasons I'm interested to know is, do you look at historical furniture? Do you go to museum exhibitions? Do you?
Yeah, I'm definitely more interested, I think, in furniture of an earlier time. But not so much, I guess, at the moment, and which I very much enjoy. Yeah, for the mid-century and that kind of thing, and earlier.
And this is in relation to the Molloy chair, which we showed in the Out of Hand exhibition. I was delighted to be able to include the Molloy chair in the Out of Hand exhibition. It uses 3D printing. You used it in your prototype. Can you tell us about your prototyping process and what benefits 3D printing can bring to that?
It made the whole process a lot easier. So I don't know if up on the screen now, that was the beginning prototyping of the Molloy chair, but it looks like a relatively straightforward, simple chair, but there's a lot of very organic components in it, all made out of solid timber. And when I made the first prototypes, it's quite challenging to make, like the back that you're looking at now. The idea of that piece is to look at all the way the different grains, depending on the bit of timber, and the same piece, it always creates a different grain. So that image just shows how each chair can have its own characteristic depending on the piece of timber that you use. But for me, say, to create the back by hand in a workshop is a relatively challenging thing to do. So we were able to draw that up on the computer, 3D print it, add it to the simpler components on the chair, and straight away I could sit in the chair and feel it to see if it was comfortable or not. And then we'd mark bits on the chair, take that back to the file in the program and change bits, reprint it until we were happy. And then, that file then went to the main production, where all the pieces were computer numerically controlled on a milling machine, using a 5-axis CNC.
Right. So this chair is actually produced by a 5-axis robot with milling heads on it.
Sydney,
in Sydney. It's an example where digital technologies have actually brought some local brought manufacturing back into the local vicinity. Do you think that digital technologies have the capacity to actually rebuild our manufacturing base here in Australia? And what have you seen with regards to this project?
Well, I guess even this piece here, if we were going to create the Molloy chair purely by hand, it would just put it at such a high price point that it probably wouldn't sell. So the company who makes it, only just before we started the project with them, they purchased a 5-axis CNC, which is this lovely Italian machine, which cost them a heap of money and a very big investment for them. But only because all the components are made on the CNC, the price point, which is still, I guess, of a higher place, but it's come to a point where it is a commercial product now and we can sell it, and it sells quite well. And this was one of the first pieces that we did with the company. Since working with them over the last 2 or 3 years, their staff on the floor have doubled. And I guess if you're looking at that kind of thing, that's stimulating local industry. And then we had 2 weeks ago, we've had an inquiry for a wonderful, I hope it happens, it might not happen. If it happens, it's for a university and they want a heap of chairs. And I rang Luke, who's the owner of the company, and he said, we're not going to get the job unless we get the price point down. And he said, well, you know, maybe that validates. I've been thinking about this new machine that's another Italian machine, and it's got 6 spindle heads, so you can create 6 parts in the same amount of time as you're making, you know, just one part, which is massively going to bring the price point down. So I guess it's interesting to see this is digital technology, which is stimulating, and it's, you know, it's off the back of jobs that are starting to happen in Australia. So it's kind of
That's
you know,
wonderful.
working with each other to move it
Must be
forward. So if we
rewarding.
got the job, would be wonderful. And if we got the job and then it inspired him to get this new machine, which then we can use on other projects as well. And you know, there's a lot of other designers now using these people because they've seen the capacity. You know, it only keeps moving forwards.